poll questions, and Suraj is going to talk a little bit about that in just a minute as I get through this introduction. We want to talk about the community engagement process. As I mentioned, it starts with talking to as many folks as we possibly can. It casts a net to a broader audience that we're reaching tonight, but it never ends, and that's the most important thing. Community dialogue and engagement in any master plan process is only as good as it continues throughout the entire process till the end and moving forward. An important part of this master plan effort, I want everybody to recognize, it's not just about building things. It's about managing, stewarding, and maintaining the good things we have. And important in this process is developing programs and thinking about how we manage this asset, this park moving forward. It's great to come up with great ideas and great plans and things, but they need to be achievable. They need to be financially manageable by the district, and they've got to be something that we can take care of and keep in good condition over years and years of use by the community. So that's really important in driving the discussion for what should be part of this update to the master plan. We jump to the next slide really quickly. A little bit of the overview of the process tells you that we have 3 phases. The very first was our own internal analyze phase, and that is really kind of digging in and understanding the park, how it works, how it operates, the good, the bad, the history, this works, this problem, understanding all the dynamics, all of the components, and understanding that it's not a park isolated by itself. It's a park within a community, and we have neighbors and we have surrounding context. And we need to understand that. We need to understand the dynamics of the land use relationships that surround this park. Very, very critical in the conversation. The second phase is engage. And engage, as we talked about, is really reaching out, listening, talking, finding out how the community feels about certain issues, how the community views and sees the park, what's working. This has been a bellwether year for the park and how it's served the community in such a critical role of that outdoor environment, the place where we could at least get out, get some fresh air, enjoy it. And it really had the use that was never expected in terms of the volume of use that that park experienced this summer. That's a tremendous opportunity. And I think we've learned something from that we can build on in terms of maintaining, imagining it moving forward. And the last phase of this, after this evening, kind of our next goal is to start bringing forth ideas from what we've heard from people. And there's a ton of different ideas. Some I would call blue sky, some more realistic, some real simple, very simple. I would call them, low-hanging fruit that we can achieve very easily. The overriding goal in this process is to develop a plan, prioritize actions, and prioritize actions that are achievable and within the means of the park district to be able to implement. That's an important thing. We don't want to come up with an idea or plans that we can't get to in the next 20 years. It's just not possible. We want to keep those out there as ideas, but we want to hone in on reality that we can achieve in the next 1, 3, 5, 10-year timeframe. With that in mind, I want to very quickly have Suraj talk a little bit about our engagement this evening in terms of the back and forth dialogue. We want to hear from you. This is an open house as much as it's virtual, and we want to hear your voices through this medium of Zoom this evening.
All right. Thank you, Scott, and thank you everyone for making time today to join us. For a lot of you, Zoom webinar might be a new platform, and for that, we want to walk you through the different features that we will be using tonight. So we want to make sure we hear from you and we understand your thoughts and ideas and vision for Gillson. And there is a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen where you can ask questions, you can add comments, and you can chat with our team members. So please make sure you use that Q&A to ask as many questions as you'd like, and just make sure you do not use the chat button, because that chat room, we won't be able to retrieve any of the questions from there post the webinar. So just make sure you add all of your questions to Q&A. We will be responding to your questions and your comments throughout the presentation. And we will also be asking you a number of polling questions. Those will pop up on your screen in a small window. The great part about having poll questions throughout the presentation is you'll be able to see the results of those poll questions in real time. So we'll be sharing the results of those polling questions also throughout the presentation. If we do not get to any of the questions due to a time limitation, we will have the ability to go through all unanswered questions and create a memo that tackles all of those. And this memo, along with the presentation deck that you'll be seeing tonight, the results of all the polling questions, and the recording of this virtual workshop will be linked to the Park District's website within the next few days. So hopefully that covers all the Zoom features. And with that, I'll give it back to Deb and the team.
I'll just hit this really quickly, and then I'm going to introduce you to Deb Salmon in our office, who's really been the focus of putting all these exhibits along with Tom and Kevin. We, as I mentioned, have done our analysis, and we broke things down into these themes or pots. There's a lot of different ideas and topics, but we wanted to corral them into common themes that we could build off of. They include park context, and that when we talk about park context, the important driver there is understanding there's a history to the park. There's a history to how we work together in the community, and there's a history of the place we are within the neighborhood. And understanding that, we want to make sure that that's an important part of this master plan effort. The landscape conditions as a bucket. Landscape has so many different meanings to so many different people. It's an important part of the character of the park. It's also an important part of some of the amenities within the park and the smaller gardens and the groups of individuals that have helped establish those and take care of those. We have to understand there's a lot of what I would call community investment built into this park at different levels that have to be understood. But like all landscape, it needs to be cared for, taken care of, and perhaps stewardship is the operative word of how we take care of the plants that we have in a meaningful and effective way moving forward. There's infrastructure and utilities. And most notably under utilities are the dynamics of stormwater that occur on the site. And I think everybody has a sense of areas that have had flooding problems at the park over the years, many of which were resolved as part of the new beach and parking lot, beach house and parking lot project. But there are still some areas where stormwater flooding conditions exist along the lower sections, eastern sections of Lake Street where it meets the sailing beach. And we want to address those. We also want to address those in the context of circulation, access, and roadways and parking. All those dynamics work in a park of this size. And we want to understand the best, what we call the best management practices to apply to those systems: biking, pedestrians, cars, parking, circulation. How do we maximize, optimize the opportunity for all of those different modes in a way that minimizes its footprint on the park? That's being smart, that's being green, and that's thinking about bigger projects and bigger ideas of how we can move forward of maintaining the quality of the park. We also want to talk about wayfinding. Wayfinding in very simple terms is signage and directions and understanding where to go and how to get places within the park. And some new wayfinding programs were implemented as part of the beach house, as part of Andy's team. Beautiful work, very clean, very simple, but they do the job of getting people from bike trail systems down to the beach house in a very effective and clean manner. It's very disjointed though with regards to the rest of the signage and wayfinding that's occurring on the site. So bringing that all together is an important condition. And then lastly, under the bucket of special conditions, those are understanding the special unique elements, areas or areas or pockets of the park that we should think about. The dog beach, the sailing beach, our relationship with the Sheridan Shores Yacht Club, the Coast Guard, our neighbors at Michigan Shores, all the different dynamics that are happening. There's lots of special little places, and embedded in that are the park shelters, and even to the extent the Wallace Bowl and the Lakeside Center are important components. I will note, and we expect folks to ask questions, we want you to ask, as part of this master plan effort, the Wallace Bowl and Lakeside Center are not being actively engaged in the master plan effort. They're not being forgotten about. Let's not forget they're important components, and we are thinking about their relationship and their dynamics. They do need investment, but before we can put investment in master plan, then we need to understand how they work and how we can make them better work for the community, meaning that we need to program them better and understand what's working, what isn't working, what kind of programs would we like to have in here or outside here that we should dive into the master plan effort at a later date. So with your ideas and your questions for that, we'd love to hear them, but it's not going to be a focus of our, I would call it, immediate prioritization schedule of this master plan effort. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Deb and the rest of the team to walk us through our findings and ideas.
Thank you, Scott. So we will start on talking about the park context. As Scott said, this is an incredible resource that we have at Gillson Park. In and of itself, the inherent qualities of the landscape, the park itself, and its setting are just awesome. And as well, it is really truly a landmark of really extreme importance to the community. And we are fully aware of that. And the more time we spend out there, the more layers and special things we see as part of the park. The other aspect of the park that is really interesting is that it has a very strong and varied neighborhood context. It's set in the midst of a single family residential neighborhood on the west. On the south, we've got Wilmette Harbor and the yacht club and Coast Guard uses, which have a different orientation to how they use Gillson Park. And then on the north side, we've got the Michigan Shores Club and the Wilmette Water Plant. So we have got all these neighbors that are here, on a daily basis, using the park in different ways and appreciating the park in different ways and noticing different things about the park, as we've seen through our community engagement. One thing to note is all of our entrances, because we're on the lake, are coming from the west. We've got a south entrance at Sheridan and Michigan Avenue. And then the north entrance is really at along Lake Avenue near Michigan Avenue. We also have some ownership issues that affect different areas of the park. MWRD owns part of the property in Gillson Park. You can see that is in the yellow tone. As well, they own the property leased to Sheridan Shores Yacht Club. And then there's different leasing arrangements for the Coast Guard, as well as some easements for the Wilmette Water Plant, heading out toward the lake there on the north side. So we have that context to consider and think about how the park and the infrastructure of the park relates or chooses not to relate to those various uses. The other thing I wanted to mention is one of the big things that's actually changed in the context of the park recently is the awesome new beach house and parking lot addition that was added and started kind of a new, the start of a more cohesive vision for the park with the addition of some of the wayfinding that Scott was talking about, as well as the bike path and walking path that takes you from Michigan Avenue down to the center of the bluff, down to the new beach house. And we really want to kind of build on some of those ideas and just kind of piggyback on that as we continue to develop more of a cohesive vision for the park that respects what we have and looks at little tweaks that we can do to make it even better than it is now. So with that, I'll pass it along to Tom to talk about some of our big ideas in relationship to the context.
Yeah, so in addition to doing some analysis work throughout the park, we wanted to do some preliminary ideas for each of these categories that Scott had alluded to earlier. And really the intent of this was to sort of gauge the public's interest in some broader ideas before we move into the visioning phase. So for park context, some of the ideas we had are to selectively remove vegetation that's in poor condition or vegetation that's impacting the landscape in an adverse fashion. And we want to put together a landscape management strategy. Additionally, there are all of these wonderful special gardens throughout the landscape, including the bird habitat garden, the wildflower preserve, and the 9/11 Memorial Garden. And we want to explore ways to better define and enhance these spaces throughout the park. We also want to look at ways to integrate art into the park. And this can be, through a temporary art installation or something that might be more permanent. As Deb talked about, there's some interesting ownership leasing agreements throughout the park, and we want to really get a better grasp of what those are and how they might limit us in our approach to designing the park and planning for the future. So we want to consider different ways that we can connect the Sheridan Shore Yacht Club to the overall character of the park, because as it currently stands, it feels like it's sort of in the park, but sort of not. And that presents an interesting challenge that we need to approach. We need to also better integrate the sailing club beach and the overall vision of the park, because as it currently stands, that's pretty far to the north and feels a little bit disjointed with the way that the rest of the park flows. So we also need to look into exploring opportunities to enhance a more distinct character between the lakeside parkland and parkside parkland, because as it stands, there's Lake Michigan, which is a very important feature within the park, and then there's a big, beautiful landscape on the park side of the park, and we need to look at ways that we might make those more distinct or also harmonize better. And then finally, we are looking at ways to improve all entries within the park, be it vehicular or pedestrian, at all points of the park. They can improve, and we just need to better understand how that can happen. So with that, we wanted to poll everybody on these various ideas and see what your thoughts on them are. So you all should be seeing a poll in front of you right now. And the question is, which of the following initiatives do you think are top priorities? And you can go ahead and check all that apply, but we ask that you be as selective as possible. And we'll give you guys a few minutes to do that. And while you are answering the poll question, maybe we've got a few Q&As that we can address.
Yeah, one of the questions is, what's the mission statement for Gillson Park, or what's the purpose of the park? Who is intended to use it, and also who funds it?
Sure, I will answer that. The mission statement of the Park District is to enrich the quality of community life and promote activities through creative programming for people of all ages and abilities, while protecting open space and natural resources for future generations. So the intent of all public parks are really for the public at large. Yes, the taxpayers do a bulk of the funding of the maintenance of the park. We also have operations within the park system, but also within Gillson Park itself that does generate some revenue from non-resident participation. And those funds are also used to help maintain the park and our operations as well.
Awesome. Someone also asked, why are we doing a new plan? Or in other words, why are we doing this update? Was there something wrong with the park?
Yes, so we had a prior plan that was put to the voters for a ballot question for the funding to bring that plan to life. That was in 2000, 14 was when the election, so the planning for that all preceded that. A lot of years have passed since then. A lot of the problems exist the same today that existed then. And the Board of Park Commissioners felt it was necessary to re-engage the planning process because the answers today on how to address the issues might be different than they were originally back in 2012 to 2014. So we're dusting off the old plans, taking a look at them, putting new eyes on it, hearing new input from the community, and seeing what comes of that process.
Awesome. So I guess we can go ahead and end the poll. So looking at the results here, from the initiatives that were provided, selectively removing vegetation in poor condition ranked as the highest initiative, followed by defining and enhancing special garden spaces, and also clarifying how leasing agreements affect long-term planning. Awesome.
And we'll keep moving on.
All right. Next, we're going to talk about the landscape conditions. You can go ahead to the next slide, Tom. Thank you. Gillson Park itself is a large ecosystem with many ecosystems within it, as Scott was talking about. There are a lot of different types of environments within Gillson Park itself. It provides habitat not only for people who are going there to recreate, but also for creatures, birds, pollinators, and I believe I heard talk of at least one beaver. So it's something that we've been learning about throughout this process, and we've also noted that each of these areas has its own special programming and maintenance needs that are associated with it. And while we're concerned with, we want to look at what is out there and become aware of what is out there, we're looking at it from a vegetative communities system rather than looking at piecemeal things, looking at what are the vegetative communities that are out there, what do they need to thrive and be maintained and continue for a healthy environment. And an important aspect of that, which we noted and also has come out through some of the focus groups, is just the importance of the maintenance aspect and an ongoing plan for care and improvements. As Scott noted, there have been a lot of different people who have kind of made some special places within the park, especially in some specific garden areas, but also in terms of just the memorial tree program, which is pretty much throughout the park and has added to the landscape. So what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through the different special areas that we have throughout the park. We've got the dune communities up at the south end, the walking beach and the dog beach, and there's some remnant dunes there that that are experiencing erosion from the lake as well as from foot traffic. As we move north at the beach house, we have some new dunes plantings that were incorporated as part of that project, as well as bioswales and in the parking lot that are helping to manage stormwater infiltration and just manage the amount of stormwater, as well as the parking lot plantings, which are, for the most part, really thriving well. Then we have some very unique garden spaces along Michigan Avenue. There's the bird habitat garden and the wildflower preserve, which are specifically pointed at providing habitat for birds and pollinators. And then there's the 9/11 Memorial Garden down by the dog beach and the mouth of the harbor, which is more of a shade garden. It also has some remnant stone elements in there that are kind of special to the park. And also, as noted with some of the engagement we've had, also provides some needed habitat for birds. In addition to that, we have the rolling tree and lawn landscape that kind of runs through the middle of the park in the open meadow area, kind of between Middle Drive and Upper Drive, and then along Michigan Avenue there as well on the south end. And then we've got the Memorial Tree Program that runs throughout the park. And we've got special accent plantings that we have at the main entrance, the main south entrance by the monument signs on Sheridan and Michigan. And then also at the Lakeview Center. And that's something that we thought might be something that could enhance the park as well moving forward. And then just as an overall note, on the plan, we are showing with a little leaf specific areas that really need some tender loving care in terms of management of invasives, restoration, and maintenance. And those are some of the things that Eco and Vision are helping us to look through. And one of the particular areas for treatment is that the bluff or the hill that goes down along Lake Avenue near the maintenance facility that really could use some enhancement, and also kind of add on to the vegetation improvements that have occurred in that area. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Similar to the park context, I'm going to walk through some preliminary ideas that we have related to the landscape at Gillson Park. First and foremost is to develop a cohesive park-wide landscape strategy. As Deb noted, there are all sorts of smaller ecosystems within the park that may or may not be working together at this point. And we would like to investigate ways that we can better connect all of these landscapes and ecosystems to make it more cohesive. So there are these various stone features that you'll find throughout the park, specifically at the Council Ring near the Lakeview Center and also at the 9/11 Memorial Garden entry. And we want to look at ways to really celebrate and enhance these features, and perhaps look at ways that we can replicate them in different landscapes throughout the park. We also need to look at reestablishing some native plant communities that are really vital to this bluff and lakeshore landscape, and also manage invasive species that we are finding along the dune communities, the Dog Beach, Grosse Point, and native habitat areas. We want to look at ways to develop more formalized plantings in key areas. There are only really a couple of spots where you might find some really concentrated formalized plantings. And we want to see if there's ways to do this in other parts throughout the park. So we also want to use plantings as a way to enhance spatial definition for seasonal park uses. One in particular that comes to mind is the ice rink that happens in the large open space. If there's a way to potentially plant around where this might be set up in the wintertime, so that it can really enhance that experience when people are using it that time. Document the existing memorial trees and plan for future placements of the memorial tree program. Right now, it's a little bit haphazard and perhaps needs just a little bit more coordination, and a lot of people might not be aware of it at this point. So we want to look into ways to really enhance that. Right now from Michigan Avenue, you might notice that there aren't a lot of opportunities to see the grand view of Lake Michigan. So we want to look at ways to be very selective at perhaps opening up some views down to Lake Michigan in a way that it really respects the current landscape and tree line but also gives people that sense of wonder while you're looking out onto the lake. We want to look at ways to expand the existing lawn, but we understand that this has to come and be balanced with any future development, and really make sure that people have enough open space, but not take away from some of the other landscape features within the park. We would like to look into a way to create a managed and volunteer curated garden walk throughout the park. And so right now there are these wonderful volunteer-led gardens throughout the park, and we want to see if there's a way to tie these together, whether it's through signage or other visual cues that can allow people to really enjoy and celebrate these spaces. And then finally, we want to look at a way to undertake a comprehensive tree and landscape inventory assessment and look into ways how we can maintain these special trees in the park, and get an idea of which trees are in poor condition versus fair condition versus really healthy condition. So with that, I think we're going to do another poll and get a sense of what people think about these various ideas. So the question is similar to the previous one. Which of the following landscape initiatives do you think are top priorities? So again, check all that apply, and we will answer some questions while you all are answering.
Yep, awesome. So one of the questions is asking, are there any plans to use the beach to generate additional revenue for the village, like more food options, outdoor movie theater events, holiday light drive-throughs, etc.?
I think the answer to that would be the staff of the district, the board of the district are always reviewing all of our operations across the district, including what takes place at Gillson, to find any and all opportunities. But that's also the input we're hoping to receive in meetings like this and through email and other avenues and opportunities that we provide via our website. So we're always looking for ways to generate more revenue to offset our costs.
Awesome. Let's see what other questions we have. Has there been discussion regarding how to better support residents with boats like kayaks, SUPs that pay for a permit? Current access point to the lake is confusing and not convenient.
I'm going to have to make an assumption as to what the question is specifically asking. I'm guessing they're speaking about people who don't have a spot on our sailing beach and use our trail-in permit and where they're to launch. That is something that internally as a staff, we have had conversation about how we need to do something better there. And that's something that we've discussed with the consultants as well. And thank you for asking the question, because it's definitely on our radar.
Awesome. One other question is specific to MWRD's land arrangement with the Park District. How does that impact the usage of the park in the area?
Sure. It's a great question, and it's one that I don't know how many people are even aware of the dynamic, and that's why we made sure to highlight it on that one of those first images. The MWRD owns land there running along Michigan Avenue that otherwise we all know is a part of Gillson Park. They lease the land to the Wilmette Park District, and while we have a certain level of autonomy, we do have restrictions. And basically our autonomy is, as long as we are using it as open recreational space, we can continue doing that. But if we had major plans to change the nature of that property, we would have to receive approvals from the MWRD before making major changes.
Definitely. And then one other question that was reoccurring was mainly about winter time and just having a shelter for residents, for example, caught in a storm. How are we planning to tackle that specifically?
Sure, and I think a very timely question with all the snow and winter we've had this year. So as far as operational amenities such as ice rinks and doing ice rinks differently, I think I saw some questions like that.
Yes.
Cross-country skiing, we do a trail out at the golf course, but there's nothing that says we couldn't do something similar in other parks, including Gillson. So operationally, these are all questions that, as a staff, we've talked about internally, happy to talk about, and the consultants hearing these conversations can have it as a part of their thought process as they come forward with their plans. As far as building of new shelters in the park for warming, needs, the Lakeview Center is there already. Don't know if additional shelters are needed, but that's again a part of our planning process that we will discuss as plans and concepts are presented to the community by this consulting team.
All right, thank you, Steve. So we will go ahead and end the poll and share with everyone the results. So from the initiatives that were presented, the ones that rose to the top include reestablishing native plant communities and managing invasive species throughout the park. That was followed by creating a garden walk throughout the park, and also some of the other initiatives that rose to the top were developing more cohesive landscape character and retaining and expanding open lawn space, reducing pavement. All right, so with that, we can go to section 3.
Sorry about that, I was muted. We'll talk about some infrastructure and utilities issues. There is a large area of infrastructure in Gillson Park. One of the poignant things is that most of the asphalt roadways are in poor condition. The sidewalks and curbs are pretty much in good condition. You can see on the graphic here where the road is red is where improvement is needed in the roadways. Currently, the lighting in the park is pretty much high pressure sodium lighting, except for in the lighting that was done in association with the parking lot and access adjacent to the beach house, which is dark sky compliant LED lighting. And that is something that we would like to incorporate in a hierarchical way throughout the park, is to improve lighting at the appropriate levels for the activities that are occurring in that area of the park. In addition, and people have been noting this, there are some ponding issues that are noted on the plan on the north side near the Lake Avenue, near the west of the parking lot, and then also on the south side near where Overlook Drive and Middle Drive converge. So that is something that we've noted. There is a stormwater sewer network that goes through the park, throughout the park, but there are certain areas that require some attention. There are also underground utilities in the park, mostly on the north side, servicing the maintenance buildings, the beach house, and the Lakeview Center, but also at the Coast Guard station. The other thing to note is there's a considerable amount of topography going from Michigan Avenue down to the lake, about 25-foot elevation change. So there are definitely some rolling hills and areas within the park that are currently not ADA compliant. And that's something that we would want to look into as part of this plan as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin to talk about some of the big ideas regarding infrastructure and utilities.
Thanks, Deb. So as we start to think about the improvement to the infrastructure and the things that you see on both on the surface and under the surface, as I look at the questions and the things flowing in about stormwater and conditions of roadways, this is what we want to address and the things that we bring up here. As we did an assessment, one of the ideas is simply repairing and replacing asphalt roadways and curbs where necessary. That doesn't mean they always go back in the same place, but really thinking about the infrastructure and how that is affected, and what it looks like and how it's maybe disintegrating or deteriorating over time. The second one is implementing a consistent lighting style throughout the park. So really creating a hierarchy of lighting levels, and using dark sky compliant LED fixtures. That means fixtures that are directed at the ground, so we don't get light pollution. We don't end up with light that's spilling in upward, in the simplest terms. So really it's about safety. It's about providing that consistency, and thinking about how that works. And I saw some questions flowing in about safety at the park and things that have occurred. And so thinking about that. The third one is addressing the poor drainage throughout the park with improved stormwater infrastructure and best management practices. We noted some areas that flood, and people have been noting those in the questions and commenting on where that happens, just north of the dog beach, where the near the beach house. So thinking about how to address that and solving those issues. The fourth item is balancing the impervious surface impact of any potential site alterations. And so that means thinking about alternative solutions for the surfacing. Somebody mentioned asphalt surfacing or concrete surfacing for paths. And are there other options for that? Do we always have to replace pathways with surfaces that are not permeable? So thinking about that and balancing it. Another part of that, and it's kind of tied to it, is developing ADA accessible routes that connect major features throughout the park. We want the park to be for everyone. We want people to be able to get to all of the garden areas and enjoy every aspect of that. So thinking about that 25-foot drop and some of the rolling hills and some of the slopes that occur, and finding solutions for achieving the ADA accessible routes. And then the last one there is developing a consolidated infrastructure improvement program that's tied to capital improvement and special project phasing. So thinking about how we fund and maintain infrastructure and utilities throughout the park. And is that on a capital budget that happens every year? We want to just outlay or organize a strategy for that out of this process, and think about how we do it either tied to projects that are occurring or simply replacement and maintenance on every year. So with that, I think we're gonna have another poll question that help ask you to prioritize some of these ideas.
All right, let's pull that one up. Infrastructure and utilities. You should be able to see the question pop up in a small window. So similar to the previous questions, which of the following infrastructure and utility initiatives do you think are top priorities? We just want to make sure everyone also realizes that you could still view your screen and read in more depth if you'd like about each of these different initiatives as you're answering the poll question. We'll go back to Q&A. So one of the questions, it's more also of a suggestion, is will we consider adding more free beach volleyball courts in the park?
We'll consider all ideas. I think
yes, exactly.
The patented answer for a meeting like this. So, but yes, no, for sure. It's always a delicate balance of having recreation and recreational activities in a park like this versus having just natural open grass and tree areas for people to relax and enjoy. And so we're going to review all of those and try and balance it as best as possible.
Perfect.
Somebody asked about, and we're going to kind of get to this in the next one a little bit. Somebody asked about the purpose of Middle Drive. And it says, can we reduce asphalt by keeping most parking close to Sheridan? Steve, I think as part of this process, we're looking at the circulation, we're looking at the overall functionality of all the roadways and balancing that with bikes and pedestrians as well. So we'll be exploring that idea and different ideas for that as we get to the next level.
Another question that came up through Q&A is, do we have any plans for shore retention?
For shore retention?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. The park board over the last year have been working with another coastal engineering company to look at all of the shoreline issues at both Gillson Park and Langdon Park along the beaches, have reviewed a lot of proposed solutions. And at this time, with lake levels actually in decline, the plan is to not specifically install anything to preserve the beach area, but as a part of the discussions here with this crew, we've been looking at landscaping concepts to revitalize, especially the dunescape that has been impacted by storms mainly last year, as ways to bring the beach back and stabilize it. But there's no initiatives of any sort of revetments or more built structures when we're talking about Gillson Park.
Great, thank you, Steve. Another question came in regarding having a full court. So there's currently a basketball hoop, and then the question is, why don't we have a full court? I assume it wasn't a priority investment as part of your needs assessment, but I'll also let you answer that one.
Sure, yeah, we don't have a full court. There is a basketball rim on that middle drive there, and we have some in some of our parks. We actually don't have a full court basketball court anywhere in any park in Wilmette. And so it's, again, like any suggestion, like additional beach volleyball courts, all ideas are good ideas and need to be reviewed and balanced against all of the thoughts and suggestions and see how it all comes out after all the information is analyzed.
Perfect. All right, so we will go ahead and end the poll and come back to Q&A in a little bit. So regarding infrastructure and utilities, initiatives that rose to the top were addressing poor drainage conditions, unifying dark sky complaint LED lighting throughout the park, and repairing and replacing asphalt roadways. Perfect. So with that, we can move to section 4, I believe.
Raj. Now we'll talk about circulation and wayfinding, and we have a lot to talk about here. There are two overarching things that have struck us, as well as many of the people that we've talked to, and that is number one, that there is no comprehensive pedestrian and bicycle and vehicular route throughout the park. You can see on the graphic, the green arrows indicate where there is contiguous pedestrian access. Where the red arrows are is where there is no pedestrian and bike circulation. And then where the yellow arrows are opportunities for potential pedestrian connections and enhancements to kind of complete more pedestrian friendly routes throughout the park. There are many breaks in the pedestrian circulation, which are indicated on the plan with the red circles. And those are things that we would want to address. The roadway circulation itself is redundant and also just non-intuitive. There are one-way routes ending up with just confusing directionality to them throughout the park. There's also I'm sorry, something's going on in my household here. We've also looked at the vehicular arrival at the swimming beach and the drop-off area at the Lakeview Center that we feel could be simplified and be made more, again, made more intuitive. There is a lot of parking in the park and in different places. We've got the new parking lot, also parking on Overlook Drive. As well, we have street parking on Upper Drive and Michigan Avenue. And we all know that on a hot day, the parking is not adequate. And it's something that we want to take a look at how we can deal with that issue in the park. There are also needs for pedestrian crossings, both on Michigan Avenue for safety concerns, as well as in the park where some of the pedestrian circulation is broken, and that's indicated with the green circles on the plan. And we also have just thought about the entry, kind of the pedestrian entry along Lake Avenue down to the beach, and just overall how the park kind of opens itself up. There may be some more nesting of hierarchical spaces to create more sense of entry and sense of place as the park is entered. Lastly, on the plan, we've noted the different monument signages that are happening on the south at Sheridan, on the north at Lake and Michigan, as well as we've got some signage at the Lakeview Center and the Wallace Bowl. And then we have the historic gateway columns at Michigan and Washington. So those give some wayfinding to the park experience. As well, there are 2 additional small wayfinding signs that were incorporated into the park as part of the Beach House project. They're along Michigan Avenue at the new bike path that goes down the hill to the parking lot, as well as at the corner of Lake and Michigan. And this is something that, as Scott mentioned, it's a nice, clean, friendly reminder of where to go. And that's something that we think that we could expand throughout the park. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Kevin.
So we just wanted to talk about there's a lot of ideas here, big list, but just some are big, some are small. And we just want to consider different things and get people's opinions on these as we think about the circulation. And that includes, the vehicular circulation, but also how that relates to people walking, people biking, consider kids, consider seniors as we think about this. So, the first one is one of the ideas, create a comprehensive pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular circulation plan that connects the entire park using existing and modified patterns. So considering what's paved now, considering what's connected now, and then thinking about how to make those connections in a way that is more comprehensive. The second one is consider the removal of Overlook Drive to create a pedestrian bike promenade. And the other one was explore the option of removing Middle Drive to accommodate green space or pedestrian bike trail. And now I saw some of these things flowing in on the comments. So thinking about what that does to the park, both functionally as people drive on Overlook or as people drive on Middle Drive and use it, but also what that would do to the park and what you gain back. So from a programming standpoint, from a green space standpoint, from a permeability standpoint. So considering those 2 things as options to explore. The fourth one there is to enhance and improve the pedestrian experience throughout the park, especially at important roadway crossings. As I've seen also in the comments, it's a really busy park. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of cars. So thinking about how those conflict points might be addressed or enhanced. Extending the pedestrian connections along the south shoreline to the Dog Beach and Grosse Pointe. It kind of dissolves there, as Deb mentioned. We noted on the plans where that pathway kind of ends and doesn't connect all the way through. Is that an important thing to address? Want to hear your thoughts on that. The next one is to provide dedicated pedestrian boardwalk and bike pathways at Harbor Drive. So addressing on the very Harbor Drive's that south edge. So addressing that as far as bikeway and getting people from Michigan Avenue, from those entry points to the lakeside or to the beach. Upgrading the pedestrian entry to the park and beach at Lake Avenue. Right now, people kind of use the drive to walk down the slope a lot of times. So you've got cars, you've got pedestrians, you've got bikes all kind of on the roadway there. And then you have these stairs that are in the picture that aren't conducive for everyone. So thinking about how maybe that can be improved, is that an important thing? Should that be a priority? The next one is considering parking pods or smaller pods or diagonal parking along main drives to increase the parking count, but also doing it in a way that is more proximate to the programming and the use of those different areas of the park. So considering how we kind of use existing infrastructure to provide parking in the right places. The next one is to continue enhancement of vehicular arrival and exit experience at the beach house parking lot. Is that an issue? Or should we address that? Is that something that should be a priority? And then the last one on the list is explore ways of making pedestrian and vehicular circulation more intuitive. And I think that kind of goes back to that first one. I think it's kind of linked, making sure that we're able to address walking paths and vehicular circulation so that we don't end up with so many conflicts and we're not using necessarily the same surface for both of those things. So I know it's a lot of things. There's a lot of things to weigh, a lot of things to consider. I think we're going to open it back up to another poll question to get your opinions on the top priorities within this category.
All right, the poll question is live. Which of the following circulation initiatives do you think are top priorities? As Tom was saying earlier, check all that apply, but try to be a bit specific. So back to Q&A. We do have a question about Wallace Bowl, and they're inquiring about, why isn't this part of the master plan?
I think the short answer is that it's not specifically excluded from the master plan. Everything within the park has an interplay with every other aspect of the park. So it is under consideration, but the priorities set out by the park board for this project was to focus more on the infrastructure and the landscaping and the park space more so than the facilities within the park.
Great. And then another question is, what are our thoughts on improving dining and live music at the park and lakefront? So an example was given, it's a cafe in Rogers Park. So like lakefront cafes, would that be an option that, we would be considering?
Oh, I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but at this point, all ideas are good ideas. But I can tell you that specific concept was explored once before in prior planning efforts, and ultimately it was not selected to be pursued. But that doesn't mean, again, that what happened in the past dictates what's going to happen in the future. So that's just a little bit of history. So all ideas are good ideas is the answer I'm going to stick with to that.
I mean, and that's very true, because we're only in the idea generation phase of the planning process. And as we move forward and we start developing park concepts and putting together, pen on a paper, we will be looking at all of these ideas and thoughts that are coming through this webinar and definitely looking to see how we can integrate the ideas. Another question was more so about maintenance. Has the park district considered using volunteers to assist in invasive species management? This is already. Sorry, yeah, that's pretty much the question.
Sure. Yes, we have. We actually benefit from volunteers helping us in certain areas of our parks, including in Gillson Park around the bird habitat. Members of the Wilmette Foundation and Go Green Wilmette have provided us that volunteer support already. And of course, we would love to get as much support as we possibly can into the future.
Great. A lot of these Q&As are just ideas and awesome thoughts. So we'll definitely be looking at all of those as we move forward with developing concepts for Gillson. All right, maybe we can, it's been 3 minutes. We could end the poll and share some of the results. So regarding circulation initiatives, the one that rose to the top was creating comprehensive pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicular circulation as part of this plan. And then that was followed by considering removing the middle drive and providing pedestrian and bicycle boardwalk at Harbor Drive. All right, thank you, everyone. So we can move on to section. Oh, no, we have the wayfinding and signage section.
Yeah, thanks, Raj. We kind of broke this out because we had so many items when we were talking about circulation, and we think this kind of goes hand in hand with it, but wanted to get these out there to folks to see what their thoughts were. You know, Deb kind of explains what's out there now. You know, some of these ideas, maybe the first one, improve entry sequences and hierarchy of spaces throughout the park. Do you think that's important? Do you think it's clear? The system as it works now, both from a vehicular standpoint and also when you're walking or riding your bike. The second one is explore ways of accessing the Washington Avenue historic columns along Michigan Avenue as more prominent gateway or feature. So maybe this is a cue for elements that could be introduced throughout the park, maybe using the stone column or the material in some way for wayfinding or for creating an element that helps orient people. And the third one is expanding the newly developed wayfinding signage design to create a more cohesive park-wide sign program. So the picture on the screen now is an example of that new design that was done as part of the recent beach house improvements. And currently there aren't as many of those signs out there, but wanted to get people's opinion on if we should expand that throughout the park. So I think we have another poll question just to get people's thoughts on these ideas.
Thank you, Kevin. The poll is now live. So some of the other thoughts or questions that we were getting through Q&A, has the park district or the village considered permitting food trucks? This would allow for great food without requiring any new infrastructure investments.
Yeah, yes, for sure. It is something we have reviewed and looked at in the past. It's something that when we held an event in conjunction with a foundation that supports the park district, we had several food trucks down there. So it's something that we've considered and will consider into the future as the exact points that you pointed out.
Perfect. It is actually pointed out by Carlene. Thank you for that. I'll take some of the credit. Another question that was asked was regarding the sailing beach. Is that sailing beach only for use by members?
The rack spaces where people can store their own personally owned equipment is for members, but we do offer in most years, we didn't last year due to COVID, but in most years we do offer equipment that we rent out to people who want to come down and rent a kayak, rent a stand-up paddleboard, and you don't have to be a member of the beach to access those amenities.
All right, perfect.
Suraj, I think it's important to note, as I've scanned through a lot of these questions, the ideas that are before us to think about are ideas that we heard in the process of engagement of the groups that we talked to, our own walks, our own discussion with staff, and do not represent all the good ideas that are out there that we're hearing from you tonight. Everybody, there's some good stuff coming out of what everybody is putting up on the board. And I want you to recognize that in the spirit of good planning, good positive planning, we want to talk about the good attributes and the bad attributes of Gillson Park, but we want to use this as an opportunity to make things better and not look back on the bad things. It's really easy to find lots of negative. I live in the town next to you and we find negative all the time. I would say that you've got some pretty special places here. And this effort is about making it better than it is. And I'm reading through a lot of operational, a lot of concerns that people have that are really focused on policy decisions and how it operates and how we park and how stickers work and the other people that come in. I want everybody to recognize that we are thinking about that. That is part of our conversation. It's a blanket that sits over all of what I would call the physical design stuff, but it will be part of our conversation, our working dialogue as a group, and we want to hear it from you. I just don't want to spend the time talking about the negative of these things, because we could spend the whole night about that and forget about all the good things that Gillson has to offer all of us.
Yeah, very well said. Thank you, Scott. I think with that, we're going to end the polling for wayfinding conditions. So from the three initiatives that were presented, expanding the wayfinding signage program sort of rose to the top, and that was followed by improving entry sequences into the park. All right, so we can move on to the next section.
All right, this section is really kind of a bit of a catch-all kind of for other issues throughout the park. And what we have done is we've kind of divided into issues that are more on the water side or the lake side and issues addressing the park side. So I'll start at the north side of near the sailing beach. Right now, the sailing beach feels somewhat separate from the rest of the beachfront. There's currently a boardwalk that runs along the beach house, and then it just kind of stops so that there's no like pedestrian connection there at the sailing beach. That's something that's been noted. As well, it's been noted that there are no bathrooms at the sailing beach, and that there may need to be some bit of facelifting of the sailing beach infrastructure. Moving south, there is a satellite paddleboard area just south of the sailing beach, and that moves us into the walking or dune beach. There has been, first of all, we do have erosion experienced, especially along this area of the beach that we've been talking about. There have been some expressions of interest for a motorized and non-motorized boat launch somewhere in this area of the beach. Going down to the aquatics beach and the dog beach, both of these beaches, the access is limited, excuse me, because of the sands blowing in this area. The main circulation path just kind of dies out into a sand path. That it makes it difficult to navigate, and also the visibility of both of those beaches is less than desirable, and I think that could be improved with some potential wayfinding. In addition, the dog beach has some infrastructure things that need to be maintained, namely the fencing, and which is a challenge with the fluctuating lake. As we go back along north, one of the special kind of interests is how do we address the harbor? What is our connection? What is the park's connection to the harbor as we go along the 9/11 Garden, past the Coast Guard station and down to the Sheridan Shore Yacht Club? What are those relationships? How can they be improved? How can the pedestrian experience in those areas be improved? Additionally, one of the things that has been noted is that the one covered picnic pavilion in the park is really popular for bookings. There are some other picnic areas that are heavily used in the park, but they don't have a pavilion there. One of those areas is on the south end near the dog beach and the 9/11 Garden. And then another one of those areas is just west of the main parking lot. And then lastly, just a note about there are two maintenance facilities, a smaller one that's associated with the Wallace Bowl, and then the main one along Lake Avenue. And just wanting to investigate ways of either relocating or more probable ways of screening those to make them less prominent in the park. And with that, I will pass it along to Andy, who's going to talk about some of the big ideas for special conditions.
Thanks, Deb. I've been waiting to talk here all night. Finally, my time in the limelight. As we mentioned, we're going to break up this conversation into the lakeside, waterside conversation, as well as and then have a poll and then bring it back to the park side. So as Scott mentioned, and you can see from all these comments rolling in, a lot of these things are questions that we've been asked either tonight or in previous stakeholder meetings that we wanted to go through and get your feedback on. So we've heard a lot about the beach and the lake levels and protecting the beach. So one of the considerations is to coordinate this master planning effort with the short and long-term shoreline improvements. Interested in hearing your thoughts on that. Also, lots of comments tonight on the chat regarding the protection from the weather, from snow and from rain. So the previous master plan identified some need for additional shelters, and we want to get your thoughts on whether that's still something we should be considering. As Deb mentioned, we'd heard at stakeholder meetings and at our site walk of the park about additional motorized or non-motorized watercraft launches to the south end of the beach, south of the dog beach. Is there interest in that? The aquatics beach, we identified, there's not much visibility to the aquatics beach, and there's questions about its nature. Should we be looking more closely at that part of the park? The dog beach, when we walked, conversations about considering additional maintenance there and potential facility improvements there, like fencing or additional zones, drinking fountains, seating, etc. Finally, in this list, should we be assessing opportunities to better delineate relationships between the park and adjacent facilities, including the harbor, the Coast Guard, Sheridan Shore, Wilmette Water Plant, etc. With that, I think we'll turn it over to the poll, correct?
Yes. Thank you, Andy. All right, the poll is live. Which of the following special conditions initiatives do you think are top priorities? We'll go back to Q&A. There was a question earlier about budget. Is there a proposed budget for for Gillson?
At this time, no. The planning effort needs to take place. We need to know what is proposed. We need to then add costs to it. We then need to look at all of those costs, and the park board, along with the administrative staff of the district, will have to decide what priorities are, not only at Gillson Park, but across the entire district, as compared to our funding mechanisms and our resources. So at this time, it's hard to put a number when we don't know exactly what we're talking about. But at this point, anything that comes from this, I can tell you that the park board has put the priorities on improving the things that you are all hitting on in these polls as the priorities: the circulation and roadways and the stormwater. These are the things that really are the emphasis. And obviously, when we do this sort of planning, we want to hear everything, but know that this work isn't proposed to necessarily be completed all at one time. It's something that, as you have the plan and as resources are available, you can implement in pieces and phases over time.
All right, awesome. So I'm going to end the poll. So looking at the results from these special conditions, coordinating park planning initiatives with planned shoreline improvements rose to the top, followed by considering additional covered shelters and improved maintenance and facilities at the dock beach. All right.
Okay. So we're gonna, and because of the separate nature of these, I think we're gonna break these into two polls. So these are quick, and we're wrapping up our presentation as well. When we were working on the beach house, we heard a lot about the sailing beach, and it's interesting to compare the comments that we're seeing today with the comments that I recall hearing at Lakefront committee meetings from a couple of years ago. But as it relates to the sailing beach, some of the questions we've been asked at our stakeholder meetings and walkthrough are the following. Should we be considering an increased connection between the sailing beach and the park, the broader park to the south? Should we be enhancing that connection? The restroom facility, should we be adding a restroom facility to the sailing beach? And you can see the feedback on the Q&A here regarding that already, which is great. And then even perhaps a little bit expanding that, should we be exploring a new facility, a larger facility than just a restroom facility that combines restrooms and community space and expanded boat storage, potentially even with a lookout deck at the sailing beach?
Okay.
We'll go ahead and launch the poll. In this poll question, you'll see two different questions essentially, but you could answer both at the same time. Oh,
Sorry. Well, then let me talk over the top. I thought it was going to be two separate polls. My mistake there. Right. The maintenance facilities, that was also a conversation that we heard a lot about at the Lakefront committee meetings while working on the beach house, just given the proximity. The large maintenance building at the downhill side of Lake Avenue, we investigated, we thought about moving that. At the end of the day, we ended up painting it and painting it into the landscape to suppress it. But we're curious again today if we should be contemplating moving that or relocating it somewhere else in the park potentially. Additionally, it's not the only maintenance facility in the park. Should we be thinking about other hardscape and softscape screening options for these maintenance buildings? And then lastly, the maintenance building over by the Wallace Bowl. There's a space there, and we're curious, kind of between the maintenance building and the Lakeview Center and Wallace Bowl, and we're curious about additional wayfinding, crosswalks, and other design strategies there to open up that space. Those are the questions there that you see. in poll number 2.
Are there any other poll questions that we would like to tackle?
I was typing on one. Both Ryrie and Sam were kind of saying the same thing, and Sam's last question was, I have to say I concur with Ryrie on the point that less is more when it comes to improvements. And I think this is great feedback, and feedback that it's important for us to hear. Clearly, the lake and the park are the incredible natural resources that you're bestowed with, and really we're just here to help you, all of Wilmette and the Park District, continue to steward these incredible natural resources. Couldn't agree more with this comment that less is more, and that the lake and the park are truly the national resources that we need to celebrate.
Awesome. We will go ahead and end the poll. Oh, no, there's a few more coming in. We'll give it another few seconds.
I just want to interject and say how much we appreciate all of this valuable input, and all of you sticking around and answering these poll questions. It's really going to help shape this master plan moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Tom. So we're ending the poll. So when it comes to sailing beach initiatives, providing new restroom facility and increasing connection of sailing beach to rest of the park rose to the top as initiatives. And then when it comes to maintenance facilities initiatives, we have better connecting Lakeview Center and Wallace Bowl to paths along parking lot is the initiative that basically rose to the top. All right, we'll move on to the following section.
I think, Suraj, I think this is, if you could just jump to the next thing, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I think we want to kind of end the presentation. I think Andy made a really good point. I think there are some clearly some sentiments in the conversation that we've heard from the community this evening about, you know, the importance of not overdoing anything. That the park has a lot of great attributes on its own, and suffice it to say, it's our job to find that right balance between keeping things up, repairing things, or taking things to another improved level. And there's a balance between all that. And we're hearing that loud and clear from everybody. And I think we want to make sure that you know that we're listening. We go back and we show on this slide just the variety of folks that we've talked to and targeted focus groups, park groups, communities, neighbors, sailing beach, dog beach, swimming folks, public at large, garden clubs, Go Green, some of the foundation folks, the specialty garden sponsors. We spoke with MWRD and the Coast Guard. I think somebody made a mention today. I looked at one of the things, you know, does the Coast Guard captain live in Wilmette? No, he doesn't live in Wilmette, but his business is in Wilmette, and he's a vital, important part of our Wilmette community, whether we believe it or not. He just happens to sit at a facility that's on our harbor area. And so we wanted to talk to him, understand his perspective. It was interesting when we use this anecdotally. He uses the park to bring his family to come visit him after he's worked, and they have a picnic in the park, and they enjoy the park for what it's worth from his perspective. So, you know, that dialogue of the other people that are using the park, we got to be aware of it. We got to be cognizant of it. But it's a pretty special place, and our job in this front end is to listen and take everything in. I think There's been a lot of dialogue, a lot of discussion about why are we doing this again. Steve brought up a really good point. We're doing it because it's your community asset and you have to manage it and you have to maintain it and you have to steward it. And you have to do it actively, not passively, because passively leaves everything to chance and it will fall apart. The board has made a decision to constantly monitor it, bring it back up to 2021, and we're bringing it back up amidst COVID, which is a different world in its own right. So we're learning a lot of good things. We heard a lot of good discussion from you. Suffice it to say, the conversation will never be over. We're going to continue to listen, but at this point, we're going to go to the next level of developing a plan and developing solutions and ideas that we will then bring back and share with the community in the coming months. I'm not sure if our next slide, Suraj, comes up. Lots of interesting comments from folks in the community we just put up to highlight some of the concerns and issues. Very much what we heard from people today, consistent themes and conversation. And if we go to the next slide, all based on some of the same topics. They're just a resounding themes and concerns from people and things that we should address, and they fall in those buckets. Interestingly enough, they always fall in those same buckets of themes that we've heard this evening. So we are at a next stage of envisioning. I want to give everybody a sense of timing of all this stuff. This isn't going to go on forever. Our process started back in late fall. We spent the time a little more challenging in COVID to get out with people, and it's taken a little bit longer than we thought, but it is what it is. We will get back together with you as we develop these ideas. We're hoping to pull some ideas together to begin sharing internally with our board in April, and then we would solidify and bring those to fruition towards the end of spring, completing it and wrapping it all up into a guided direction or a guided pathway for the district to move forward on. So I thank you for all of your time with us this evening. I know there's lots of other things you could have done with your time. We will bring everything back that we heard tonight, visually, responses. The whole program will be uploaded to the website. We look forward to visiting with you again in the coming months, and we will be we'll be on for another 10 minutes if you want to talk with us a little bit. If anybody wants to, I think Suraj, we have the ability to have a little live chat for another 5-10 minutes or so.
Yes, we have two attendees raising their hands. And just before we get to that, I also want to mention that we put a link to a survey in the chat room. So if you go to the chat room in the bottom of your screen, you could go and take a very short survey that has 2 open-ended questions asking you to sort of describe your vision for Gillson Park. And then with that, we'll take the next 5-10 minutes to allow folks to speak. So just going through. Mary. I'm giving you permission to, okay, I think you can speak now.
Is this me? I'm Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Hi, I'm a neighborhood stakeholder, and I unfortunately did not hear I didn't get to the first meeting, and so I appreciate this opportunity to just give some of my comments to the Lakota report. I live at 735 Michigan. I've been a neighbor since 1977, and I did send a detailed response to Kevin Clark earlier when I missed the first meeting. I would like to just say that the park is consistently referred to by the community as a treasure. It is that, and the taxpayer support should not require further monetization. I'm not alone in the desire to have a real landscape plan incorporated within the Lakota project, and it is not an exaggeration to say that as many as 100 trees have been lost during the past 40 years. They have not been replaced. Gillson would benefit from a visionary plan, a real budget, and staff commitment to the landscape. The longstanding tension between active and passive use of the park has been exacerbated by the reemergence after 39 years of a request for installation of disc, formerly called Frisbee golf, at Gillson. The Park District well knows that this installation was not successful, yet it continues to entertain email voting, distracting from the focus on the plan under consideration today. Frisbee, now disc golf, has no place in the park for the reason that it would dedicate the entire area to a single and dangerous use. For 3 years, it was a scar on the landscape. It attracted cars, trucks, and numerous loud, beer-drinking young men at all hours. It has no place in a residential neighborhood. The traffic volume on Michigan Avenue continues to increase and has done so exponentially with the 2020 closing of beach parking to day passes. The impossible parking situation on Michigan shows no sign of abating, so there's no reason to add another activity accessed by ever more people with cars. The part of Gillson along Michigan Avenue being suggested for the disc golf is one that's enjoyed by passive users. Families picnic under the trees. People enjoy impromptu volleyball games, tightrope walking practice, lounging from hammocks tied to trees, and reading in the shade. All of these peaceful uses would no longer be possible with the installation of disc golf. The most important safety issue is the real need for a sidewalk at the entrance parallel with the harbor drive to the overlook, picnic area, and dog beach. Presently, people are forced into the street on foot with buggies, wagons, and dogs, presenting a real hazard. And I noticed you already are addressing this in your plan. There's an almost irresistible desire on the part of the Park District to build things in the park. The Citizens Lakefront Commission of 2014, after 2 years of meetings, recommended, quote, preservation of the natural environment, no new buildings, no additional parking, a landscape plan, and no activities which could be done elsewhere in the park system. There is no need to build any more structures to accommodate 6 weeks of summer activity. The overlook is highly utilized in all seasons for the natural beauty of the setting. It is an important access point for people who cannot walk to the beach. The present parking arrangement is fine. And the idea of moving the unsightly maintenance shed to the bluff in front of the waterworks would successfully resolve a number of long-standing issues for the sailing community. Lakeview Center just needs to be painted that nice black-green color. That's it. Grass and trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. That was appreciated. And we did get your email, so we've got you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you, Mary.
I think we got time for one more if we can, and let's keep it 3 minutes or under. I don't want to make this a public hearing, but let's
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's go with Dale.
Yeah.
Dale, are you able to speak?
Is that better?
There you go.
Sorry, faux pas as usual. I think just to keep it brief, I think there's some excellent facilities already at the park. I was just a little concerned when you said that considering the use of the facilities had been deprioritized versus looking at the roads and the infrastructure. I mean, my challenge would be, how can we use some of the existing facilities more? Now we've got that new car park at the beach. How can that be used more than just for 3 months of the year when there's the things? How can the sailing beach be used more by people? How do you make it more accessible? How do we use Wallace Bowl more? How can we do more things on the wonderful lawns that we've already got that Mary talks so passionately about? So, and I was just concerned when you said that wasn't part of the scope of this. It feels like, I understand you've got to look at the quality of the roads. Some of them need repairing and stuff like that. But it almost feels like we're missing the big picture to fix some of the small things.
Yeah, Dale, you made a really good point. I think Director Wilson stated it fairly clearly, and maybe I didn't. My apologies for that. We aren't avoiding Wallace Bowl. We aren't avoiding Lakeside Center. They will be part of the planning process, how they integrate. What we're not doing, and what you just pointed to, which is probably one of the most important things that the district is doing as part of this behind the scenes, is understanding how all these areas work, how they're programmed, and how they're meeting the needs of the community effectively or not. Sailing Beach, Regular Beach, Dog Beach, Wallace Bowl. What else can we program in there? And at the same time, what does it cost to do that? What's the management side of that? Is there a revenue stream? How does it benefit the whole community? And is it carefully balanced in the active passive? Somebody brought up the active passive balance of making this park feel right, not overdone. So that's part of our charge. What we're not doing is redesigning the architecture of the Lakeside building as part of this, where we may make suggestions that there's improvements to it, but not redesign it, so to speak.
Great, thanks for the clarification.
You got it. Any other quick thoughts? I think we're kind of at our time limit. Suraj, if I've got it, we got to shut it down at 6:45, right?
Yeah,
Any other burning thoughts or folks out there?
we can take one quick more person, and then we can end it at 6:45. But let's
Okay.
please try to keep it quick.
That sounds good.
Beth? Beth, you're muted. I'm not sure. Let's try Isaac.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll try to be very brief. Just want to say that I actually agree with the vast majority of what Mary had to say. I really do think we have a great park, and I don't think that the goal is to just start cramming things in left and right and rebuilding the whole thing. I do really think that there's a lot of opportunity there with the discussion about potentially getting rid of the middle drive. I know that there's a lot of impatience and all that, so I'm not saying I'm 100% sold on it, but it does feel like we have a lot of roadway going through the middle of our park. So I definitely think that that's an interesting opportunity there. And I will speak just briefly as kind of the person who happens to be pushing for disc golf in Wilmette. There's a lot of other supporters, but I'll identify myself as one that's kind of come out for that. I just want to say that it's a great popular game. It's growing all around the country and around the world. And it's actually already present in Glenview, Glencoe, Highland Park, Evanston. They all have it in their public parks. So I just want to say that it's a very normal sport. It's not something that's going to be totally disruptive, nor is it going to completely overtake it. The majority of the parks that I've played it in, it's often worked in around other facilities, baseball fields, tennis courts and things. I mean, it's not something that necessarily dominates an entire park. Again, I know this isn't just a disc golf meeting, so I just wanted to speak on that very briefly. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, I think we've hit our time. Again, thank you for everybody who stayed on, and we will get all this information back out to you and keep you abreast of the planning process as we move along. So thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
so much, everybody.
Thank you.